I also believe we need to ban Donald Trump from attending the G7 summit. Donald Trump should not be welcome here.
Yes, that's how crazy the talk is getting in Canada. And if you're wondering who that clown is, well, that's Jagmeet Singh, the leader of Canada's Socialist and New Democratic Party, the guy who has been propping up the Liberal government for the past 4 or 5 years at least. When we come back, my guest today, Mr. Michael Lee of Michael Lee Strategies, a financial analyst, who will discuss the tariff question with me as well as his discovery of the GDP in Canada collapsing under Justin Trudeau. When we come back. We need, look at the change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please like the station now if you can. Help us beat that YouTube logarithm reserved for small c conservative stations. And resubscribe if you have been unsubscribed. Happens all the time. Or subscribe today if you've never done so. Share this broadcast with your friends and family. We need to get the word out about how catastrophic a trade war with the U.S. will be and why we need to move forward with a conservative government in Canada. My guest today is Michael Lee of Michael Lee Strategies. And I just talk a few minutes here about your company, which offers personalized holistic financial planning and investment management for individuals and families with 5 million or more of investable assets. Founded in 2019 by a 25-year-old financial service industry veteran, already a veteran at 25, Michael Lee. Michael Lee Strategy focuses on offering comfort through clarity to pre-retirees and retirees by delivering a personalized, holistic strategy that marries comprehensive financial planning and professional investment management. So very pleased to have you here today with us, Mike, and your financial analysis is welcome at this time.
Yes.
So I heard you the other day on Fox Business News, and that's I was quite impressed. But I'm just going to play a brief clip from President Donald Trump's update, if it was, on tariffs. And a lot of us are confused as to where we stand. And I've got to say at the outset, I'm a columnist for Human Events. I was a columnist for the Daily Caller for 5 years. Everybody knows that I love Donald Trump. Everybody knows that I think he's doing a superb job with his work his first 100 days. But I don't want a trade war. Canadian conservatives do not want a trade war. We do not want to see these tariffs come through. And I don't know if Donald Trump clarified the situation very much yesterday.
Can you clarify the Canada-Mexico tariffs? You had put that 30-day pause, but you just referred to April.
25%.
25%. When does it go into effect?
April 2nd.
April 2nd for Canada-Mexico.
Correct.
And
for everything.
Well, we have the fentanyl-related is a pause. If they can prove to the president they've done an excellent job, that's what they first do in 30 days.
Have you guys seen any
but then the overall is April 2nd. So the big transaction is April 2nd, but the fentanyl-related things, they're working hard on the border. At the end of that 30 days, they have to prove to the president that they've satisfied him to that regard. If they have, then he'll give them a pause, or he won't.
So I don't know if we've satisfied the president on the border. There have been some movement made. We have a fentanyl czar now. I don't see 10,000 frontline personnel at the border yet, which Trudeau promised Donald Trump about a month ago now to get this extension at least. So the other day when you were on Fox Business, you were saying that you wonder why Donald Trump is so up on punishing Canada. Maybe it's all about Justin Trudeau. Do you think that's really what's going on here?
So I don't get it. Why he's so tough on Canada. I think a lot of it has to do with Trudeau, particularly his capture by the Chinese Communist Party. But the other thing I don't get is why aren't Canadians more upset with him? You have a more educated population than the United States, yet over the last decade, your quality of life has collapsed. If you look at the resources and you look at the number of barrels of oil per capita, you have 40 times the amount of oil per capita than the U.S. does, yet you pay a third more for gasoline prices. Your government-run healthcare, I mean, it's nice that it's free, but when you include out of pocket and what the government spends per capita, compare it to the U.S., it's 20 to 30% more. Let me ask you, if money was no object, where would you rather get surgery? Like, where would you rather get healthcare? Maybe some people say Canada, maybe some people say the U.S., but is it 30% more, and is it worth paying almost double the tax rate on average? And so I don't know if this is an all-out assault from an ideological front, in that the way that I look at Trudeau is he doesn't govern. And the Liberals, by and large, they govern for a narrative. They don't govern for an objective, right? Because you're not gonna change the climate. You're not gonna solve historical injustices, right? All you've done is destroy a country. And so, like the comment I made on GDP, in 2014, GDP per capita was about $50,000 US, and the US was like at 53. Now Canada's at 56,000 US dollars. And when you factor in your inflation, that's a dramatic drop. And the US is at 83,000 a decade later. Like, why? Like, you have to ask yourself, why have we advanced so much more? And particularly in that decade, Donald Trump was only president for 4 years. 6 years, we had two were Barack Obama, 4 were Joe Biden, and they were devastating. We both went through COVID. So I don't know if this is personal, or it's to hammer home, or it could be as simple as around the Michigan area, the auto production, especially down the assembly, like down the supply chain lines, there's a tremendous amount of manufacturing that's going on in Canada that he wants to see move back over the border to Michigan. And so I don't know why he's so aggressive. Whereas the flip side, Mexico has been one of the most destabilizing forces in the United States. It's a high degree of probability that their president is on the payroll of one of the cartels, right? And not only the president, every layer of government, and that we are looking at a hot war with Mexico, at least the cartels. So I don't know why we aren't harder on Mexico and we're not cutting Canada some slack, because Trump is a little bit dismissive of how good of an ally Canada has been over the years. I mean, you see in the movie Argo, you have the Canadian ambassador risking his life to get Americans out of Iran. So like there's a long history. They are like, Canada is a good ally, but you've destroyed your country.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that. Now, the other day I heard you state that Canada's GDP has dropped by 20% during the decade of the Trudeau government. Does your research actually confirm that?
So so when you look at GDP per capita, right? You've gone from 53 to 50, like just under 51,000 to just above 53, 54,000. When you factor in inflation, yes. Okay, your purchasing power parity is about flat with inflation when you look at GDP per capita and local, but that's not your purchasing power parity. That's not an apples to apples comparison. It's what is it in US dollar terms? What can you buy in goods from the rest of the world on an equal playing field? So when you factor in how much less your currency is with the inflation that you had, because in this last decade you've also doubled your national debt. Do you know what the deficit was in 2014 for Canada? It was $6 billion, 6 billion Canadian dollars, right? Yeah. And you had a year under Trudeau where it was 300. So it is just unbelievable how just 10 years ago, you guys were basically lockstep with the United States, okay, and having so much oil, right? And so if you look at how on average, what you pay per gallon of gasoline, it's like roughly $4 over the last decade. Saudi Arabia So you have 4,000 gallons of oil per capita. Saudi Arabia has about 7,800, but they're paying like 65, 70 cents for a gallon of gasoline. Imagine how different your economy should be and your way of life would be without this massive liberal government overreach, without this war on fossil fuels to solve climate. What do you think life would look like in Canada without these liberals that you keep voting in charge?
Well, yes, and you called it the death knell for a nation. I think that's very, very appropriate. I do think there's a remedy, and that remedy would be to get rid of this liberal government. But that's the conundrum we find ourselves in right now. Like conservative-minded Canadians, small c or large c, are saying, Donald Trump, just stop the rhetoric for a couple of weeks so we can have an election up here, get rid of this liberal government, and which is on the verge of course, appointing or electing Mark Carney, a former governor of the Bank of England, as its new leader. And it's going to be a much rougher election than it was, say, a month ago when Justin Trudeau had first announced his retirement. And the polling is suggesting that the race is evening up, which I found astounding because the last 10 years have been devastating. And talk about Canadian healthcare. I love to talk about Canadian healthcare because people always say it's free. Well, of course it's not free. I pay $5,000-$6,000 every year in my taxes just for Canadian healthcare, which doesn't work. The waiting lists are abominable. If I really need an operation, if my life is on the line, I'll probably go to the United States. And I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed over the years who have done that. In fact, it's incredible. You'll find this hard to believe, but people are offered euthanasia in Canada quicker than they're offered an operation for cancer, for stage 4 cancer. Much easier just to have them euthanized. That's where we've come to in healthcare in this country. That's a true death knell of a nation as well. And Canada is in a horrible predicament. And a lot of Canadian conservatives, as I said, are saying, Donald Trump, can you just take the pressure off? Because the more you go against Canada, the more the liberals are using that message, exploiting that message, because they don't want to run against the conservatives. They don't want to run on their record. They want to run against Donald Trump and this evil American nemesis, which they're creating right now. So every time I get an opportunity when I'm on an American station or YouTube, I say, please drop the rhetoric. Let's get over this. We're on the verge of electing a conservative government in this country. And that's really where the future has to be. But I don't know if Donald Trump even knows who Pierre Poilievre is. And this is the man who's probably going to be our next prime minister.
Yeah, I think he's kind of a milquetoast conservative. I don't, he doesn't really inspire me as someone that's going to address these problems. And the problem, you need more than a conservative leader. You need moral clarity in that this climate change agenda, it's no different than the euthanasia agenda. It's anti-humanity. And by restricting you and your country from using your natural resources to fuel the world, because everything we do revolves around fossil fuels. And there's somehow that this boogeyman of CO2 that every single individual breathes out at almost every single second of a day is somehow going to kill us all or end the world is utter and complete nonsense. Okay. I am for a clean environment, but I am not for destroying the Western world in the name of virtue signaling. Okay. And so this euthanasia, where there's government assistance to help you end your life early, is one of the most anti-humanity things that's I've ever witnessed, I've ever seen. There's nothing good about this. This can only be it only can be contrived in the mind of a godless liberal that this would be a government policy. And yes, it is not, it's not an accident. It's not a bug in the system that it's easier for you to kill yourself than it is for you to get cancer treatment. Okay, that is the feature. This is your government, and you have all these virtue signaling liberals that want to tell you how to live your life, that don't give a what about you, the quality of your life. They hate people, they hate humanity. They think the earth is the supreme leader. It is totally and completely demonic. And until you have a leader that can talk in these plain terms and say what we are doing to ourselves is destroying our country, we are ruining the quality of life, so that stupid liberals that are the bastard son of communist dictators can run our great nation into the ground. It does not serve anyone's interest, including the United States, to see Canada run into a ditch. So look, I don't know why Donald Trump has such a massive angst against Canada, but you got to imagine that the truckers, right? The support for that was so far ranging, and I think there's a lot of people out there that want to vote conservative, but they need a leader they can get behind. They need someone to call it like it is. They need someone to get out there and say, like, hey, a lot of you liberals, you think you're doing the right thing, but what you're really doing is, you're in favor of death, of destruction, of ruining the quality of life, because you somehow think that there's this climate boogeyman in the room with you that's going to kill us all, when in reality, it's all fake. It's all built on a lie that somehow greenhouse gases, that carbon dioxide, is going to be the end of us all.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Poilievre does need to get out there and clarify his message. It needs to be a stronger small c conservative message. And unfortunately, he's been echoing some of the Liberal Party statements on Donald Trump and whatnot. But, Trump is wrong about one thing. He keeps talking about a $200 billion subsidy that Canada is allegedly getting. I think what he means is there's a $200 billion trade deficit, but that's not right either. It's more like $46 billion. And if you take out the energy, the oil and gas exports, the United States actually has a trade surplus with Canada. And I have to state that, because I'm getting tired of hearing about the subsidy that Canada is getting. It's not. And I think most Americans don't know that Canada is the United States' largest trading partner. We are joined at the hip in so many ways, not just economically, but through our militaries. We have a continental defense agreement. We have NORAD. We've been members of NATO, from founding members of NATO. I spent a lot of time in the U.S. when I was a Canadian Air Force officer, because we spend a lot of time working with the U.S., the primary allies. So Canada is an integral part of this relationship, and we always will be. But I don't know why Trump continues to talk about $200 billion in a subsidy. And America needs our gas right now, unless it goes to Venezuela, because the Canadian gas, the crude oil that we're shipping to the U.S. at very cheap prices, is the kind that U.S. refineries require, because it's not the sweet crude produced in the U.S. It's more sulfuric. So I don't think that's something that would be easily alleviated if suddenly Canadian oil and gas was cut off to the U.S.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm a little bit perplexed as to this, but we spend too much on defense. And like the U.S., like we have our own problems, and our own problems are devastating us. So this excess spending, by and large, to include like not only the Democrats but absolutely the Republicans as well, that our defense budget is like almost $1 trillion US, right? So and they want to increase it, and so Trump in my estimation, wants to cut that. So he wants to see all the other NATO partners go ahead and increase their defense spending. But it's also what you've seen in the U.S. for your Canadian viewers is just a complete and total field stripping and gutting of any ability to manufacture goods in the U.S. And so part of that's regulation. Part of that is offshoring. Part of that was our tax code, because we had a corporate tax rate of 35% prior to the tax relief that they passed in 2017. It took that corporate rate down to 21%, and then no tax on, and then you were taxed on worldwide goods. So if you were making stuff in the U.S. and selling it abroad, if you tried to repatriate that money, you had to pay 35% on that. So so you had that reformation of the tax code, and then COVID came in, and we've done a bit of a 180 in the U.S. over the last 20 years, in that by and large, large corporations, the Wall Street class, firmly support the Democrats. And when I started really paying attention to politics, 20 years ago, as we're going to the Iraq War, most of the CEOs of the big banks were Republicans. CEOs of like Fortune 500 were George Bush, senior and junior type Republicans. And then as Barack Obama came in, you started seeing people come over. Trump comes in, they all switch over, and they're all behind the Democrat Party. So I think in large part it's because the Republicans picked up where Bill Clinton came on, letting China in the WTO, and the signing of NAFTA. So the gutting of our manufacturing base. And then as the financial crisis happened in 2008, there was no recovery in manufacturing in many of the Rust Belt states, in the small town America from 2008. And particularly, this is the same place where the fentanyl just grabbed hold of our country. And so the fentanyl, I don't know how many people are familiar with this. We've lost between 400,000 and 500,000 people over the last decade to fentanyl deaths. That's not drug overdoses. That's fentanyl overdoses over the last decade. These are mind-blowing numbers. And it's in these same manufacturing towns where people lose hope. And so this theme of this forgotten man in the U.S., like this working class person. And so I number one, I know he hates Justin Trudeau. In his book, he basically called out the fact that he's the illegitimate son of Fidel Castro. Okay. And people don't want to bring that up, but Trump wrote a book after he left office. It came out, and that's what he specifically said about him. I don't think it's a good idea for the U.S. to make Canada their 51st state. I mean, it'd be awesome for us to have all that oil, but you're too liberal and you'll turn our country blue and you'll run our country into the ground. So I don't want that. But all the manufacturing that you have right over the bridges in Michigan, Trump wants that back in the U.S. and he'll probably overreact to get it. But again, moving that stuff back here, moving it to Indiana, moving it to small town Michigan, moving that stuff there is going to make a huge difference in some of the most affected areas in the country. And every country wants manufacturing in the U.S. because of in their country, you want to be a producer of goods because of the multiplier effect. Taking raw elements, putting it together, delivering a finished good. Sorry for the noise. I am in a hotel room in New York City. But every country wants that, and we're all fighting for that. And to the degree you can become self-contained, make your own stuff, it's much beneficial for not only for the population but the overall economy. And we are a services-based economy, and it's when you use Germany as the example, where they not only charge a tariff, they charge a VAT tax. So yes, that VAT tax is uniform on everything over there, but when they make a car over there and sell in the U.S. and we have a very small tariff and no VAT tax, the same $50,000 car that we sell over there ends up being almost 70 grand, whereas the $50,000 car that they sell over there ends up being $42,000 over here. It makes it a lot easier for Germany to mass produce stuff, and that's just putting aside the fact that the reason why the Germans don't really have a military is because they have the euro, because it artificially deflates their currency the same way China does, so that they can have all the manufacturing in their country. But there's all of these things going on that have over decades destroyed large swaths of our country. And the left in our country feels the same way about our population as the left in your country does. They don't care. They want you to die. The governing is about virtue signaling, not about achieving results and providing better outcomes for the populace. So I tend to agree with you that the rhetoric towards Canada is a little bit over the top. I'm a little bit puzzled. And so I almost kind of like wish you wouldn't do it, because like I think most Americans, like, we make fun of Canada and it's a joke, but like we like them. Like, you know, we're similar countries, and it's maybe a little malcontent in the way that you guys have destroyed yours that we don't want it here. There's an end game in Trump's mind. I don't know what it is.
Well, there's no question we need a new birth of freedom in this country, and I think you're maybe being a little too hard on Molly. Yeah. Although I'm critical as well, because I want to see results from this guy, and rhetoric is not enough. But I'm hoping we have a future in this country, and
David, I'll just say that the leader to look towards in this country, as much as I love Trump, is J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance is a lot more conservative and a lot more hardline than Donald Trump. But I don't want to say he speaks eloquently. He speaks in plain speak so that everyone can understand him. But the guy's probably got a 140 or 150 IQ. And so if you can break these conservative concepts down and not try to pander, okay, be a hardliner, but at the same time be polite, okay, people wake up to that and it resonates. And like, they've tried to paint this guy as a weirdo, as this or that. Like, the fact of the matter is he's right. And he's not right on a few things. He's right on almost everything. And so Pierre Polov, I'm sorry for butchering his name. He doesn't need to be Trump. He needs to be J.D. Vance, because I think they probably agree on just about everything. They have similar styles, but you don't need to pander. You don't need to say, well, maybe you're right about this. No, you're wrong. You have destroyed our country. We're tired of it. Canadians deserve better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And interestingly enough, I have a column coming out today in Human Events talking about J.D. Vance not only being the potential successor to Donald Trump as president, but the heir to the MAGA mantle. I am hugely impressed by J.D. Vance every time he opens his mouth. I loved what he did to Europe, went over there and told them to stop shutting down free speech, which, of course, Trudeau is a master of in Canada. He is trying to censor everybody on the internet, and it's driving all of us who believe that free speech is foundational to democracy crazy. But that is Justin Trudeau. But you mentioned the money that has been wasted in support of climate change agenda. And of course, nobody has wasted more than Justin Trudeau. His potential successor, though, and I don't know if Americans have digested this or even are aware of this, but Mark Carney is a globalist. The last couple of years, he was the UN Goodwill Ambassador for climate change. He shows up in Canada. He's been advising the Liberal government for the past decade. He comes back full-time last September to be a full-time advisor to the Trudeau government on the economy, which, of course, he had a huge part in destroying. But he's now talking about not just a corporate climate or a corporate carbon tax, which, of course, will trickle down to consumers overnight. He's also talking about a climate or a carbon tariff, a carbon tariff. And if this doesn't scare corporations and businesses out of Canada overnight, nothing else will. This is a frightening concept. He's going to have a carbon tariff to put on people he likes to describe as polluters. Anyone producing CO2, he describes as pollution, just as Justin Trudeau would love to say. Of course, CO2 is not a pollution. It's not a pollutant. It's not pollution. But is this idea of a carbon or tariff going to demolish what's left of the corporate structure in Canada?
So Mark Carney should terrify every Canadian, okay? Because Justin Trudeau is a virtue signaling you know what, right? Like, he is just as fake as it comes. Mark Carney is extraordinarily intelligent. He will be ultra more effective at destroying your country. Again, it's like Trump 1.0 versus Trump 2.0. Like, the first one was a little all over the place. The second one is like laser precision, getting everything done. Mark Carney's going to come in and destroy everything. To beat this, like, again, like you need moral clarity from the conservative, whether it's Pure Blue or anybody else, to say like, hey, you can't tax carbon credits. The world is not ending. You can tell me the climate is changing. It is changing. It's always changing since the beginning of the history of time. Okay, over the last 100 years, deaths from climate-related incidents are down 98%. Okay, due in large part to technology only made available because of cheap energy through fossil fuels. Okay, everything that you're saying about this carbon tax is anti-humanity. I haven't noticed the weather getting better. It's the hubris to think that you can control the climate of this planet, one that has frozen over and thawed multiple times before the human race even existed. Okay, you only have temperature data for like 120 years for a planet that's existed for close to 5 billion. To think that that's enough sample size just goes to show your hubris. It's all about power and control. And like anybody starts talking about this, I just tell them about like my favorite picture. And it's Noah leading 2 giraffes onto the ark. And the first giraffe says to the second giraffe, if only we paid more taxes, we wouldn't be doing this right now.
Oh, that is so apropos. I think a lot of people are shocked that Donald Trump actually does what he says he was going to do. He promised a lot during that election campaign, and my God, he's implementing so much of it immediately. From day one, he's been doing that. People are so used to politicians lying and telling people they're going to do these things and they never do them. Donald Trump's the opposite. He's come into power. He's done everything. He's telegraphing that he's going to continue to do everything he promised to do. Now, one of the things he discussed in the campaign, which I found, as somebody who grew up reading Ayn Rand and being fascinated with laissez-faire capitalism, objectivism, he talked about eliminating the income tax in America, going back to an 1890s economy based on tariffs, where the government is essentially funding itself through tariffs, not through the expropriation of personal funds from people's income. And I've always said taxation is the income tax is theft. Do you really think he's serious about that too? That he could actually go into eliminating the income tax and relying on tariffs to fund the government?
I think in his mind, he's serious. I just don't see it. And I think this is why him and Elon are BFF, like to the end, and they're inseparable, is because the two of them both think like this. They both think they think of something that's almost impossible. And like when Trump says, this is going to be great, this is going to be really great, it's going to be the best, it's going to be the biggest, it's going to be the fastest, it's going to be the greatest, I love it, you're going to love it, everyone's going to love it. That's not fluff. This is the way that he thinks. This is like he believes this, and he tells himself this, and it's the perpetual I don't know if the word is cognitive dissonance, where you're just kind of detached from reality, everyone else's reality, and you kind of have like the audacity to dream, like who thinks they're going to run for president the first time and win? Like who thinks they're going to do all these things and this is the way it should be? So to take a step back to tariffs, the U.S. is like the #1 economy in the world. Like we are the #1 GDP. We are the 800-pound gorilla. Okay, we have the best market to do business in. We have the best capital markets. We have the best rule of law for investors and for businesses to operate of anywhere else in the world. So why would we be the cheapest place to do business for countries from elsewhere in the world? And like, for China and for Mexico, you can go ahead with punitive type tariffs. Okay. I do not agree in one iota that you should be punitive towards Canada, but China and Mexico, 110% you can be punitive and try to achieve political means through tariffs. But for everyone else, let's just deal on an equal playing field. Like, why would it be, what it's going to cost American companies to do business in your country? Okay. It should cost German car makers, English companies, Indian companies, it should cost them the same to do business in the US. So that's putting things on an even playing field. I think it's so rational, yet it's so far out of the box because of the capture in the U.S., because the private equity companies, the global corporations have figured out 6 ways from Sunday to try to manipulate everything for the benefit of their shareholders, their investors, and not really America. And I don't know that it's necessarily their responsibility, but it is the president's responsibility to be looking out for America and America ahead of everyone else. And look, so the on-rand, like free trade, free markets, they don't exist. They exist in textbooks. They exist in libertarian think tanks, and we're taught all to be free traders, but it doesn't exist. And so we can sit here and say we want these things, and we want free trade, but if it's not real, you're just allowing yourself to be taken advantage of, which has been Trump's point for like 30 years. Going back, watching on TV, like we're allowing ourselves to be manipulated. And like when Ross Perot ran for president in 1992, he talked about what NAFTA was going to do to this country, and he was 100% right. And so it's and this is why it's resonating, because and like why he's so popular in the US. And like, I don't know what people are reading in Canada, but Harvard Harris, which continually understates the support for Trump by anywhere from 2 to 5 points, had every major issue he's implementing and he's governing on, and he's above 60% on like every single one of them, which is unheard of. So a big win in a poll is if it's 55 to 45 in the US, because we are a divided country. So when you start getting up into the 60s and the disagrees like in the 30s, and then you have some unsures, like that's massive landslides in the US. So the popularity that Donald Trump has right now is almost beyond imagination. Rasmussen with the poll out yesterday. So we have a thing that's been tracking right track, wrong track. Do you believe the US is on the right track versus the wrong track? Okay, we are stepping into positive territories for the first time since pre-financial crisis. So Donald Trump has his own style, and Canada doesn't need someone with Donald Trump's style, but Canada needs somebody to come in and with moral clarity to say, you are full of excrement. You are full of it. You're destroying this country. Here's why.
Yeah, I agree. We need to move forward. We need an environment that's favorable to both countries, trade-wise. A trade war will be catastrophic for Canada. I can't say that for the U.S. I think it might have a huge impact on energy pricing in the U.S., and the price of gasoline will definitely go up if there's a trade war. However, in Canada, this could trigger a Great Depression, capital G, capital D, and this could be devastating. So I'm fighting for some more negotiation. I'm fighting for some sanity. Get rid of this liberal government, have a government that does at least claim to be a common sense conservative solution to this, because we can't afford a trade war with the United States. The Liberal Party would like a trade war because they think it's a winning solution for them. It's a winning strategy, and it's all politics. So I think what you're saying, we're not going to change Donald Trump, but I think Donald Trump can look at Canada and say, you're capable of so much better. I don't want to destroy you, but I think if I just find some common ground, but if I do so, fix it, fix the problem at the border, fix the fentanyl problem, and fix the problem with Mark Carney and your net zero fantasies. And that's where we have to go. And I'm hoping we can find a solution. But your input today has been fantastic.
One last thing. So the UK entered a net zero alliance in 2004, and they have grown at 25% of the rate of every other G8 nation. Net zero is a death knell for your industrial base. It is a death knell for your country. You want nothing to do with it. It doesn't help anyone other than the people running these BS green energy projects.
Yeah, that is so true. Michael Lee of Michael Lee Strategy, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a fascinating discussion, and hope to see you on here again. And you can catch Michael on a lot of shows. I don't know, are you a contributor on Fox Business, or
just a very frequent guest?
A very frequent guest. I've seen you on Fox News as well. You're on Newsmax TV, Yahoo, Cheddar News, TD Ameritrade Network. You've also been on CNBC, and you're quoted a lot on Bloomberg News and the U.S. News and World Report. And it's been fascinating talking to you today, Michael. Thank you for joining me, and God bless. And God bless our two countries.
Yes. God bless Canada. And you guys did win the Four Nations, so you got that going.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure talking to you. That's all we have time for today, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Actually, let's remind you all about Thank you for joining me today. I'll be back again tomorrow and 10 o'clock on time. And have a look at the merchandise in our store. I think it's some of the best available kit out there, and we're proud of it. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Thanks for joining me today. And we'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need.